Hey, Cash Flow Squad, welcome to the podcast. We have a really fun guest today. Not only is she a real estate agent, she is a real estate investor. She's been contributing for a long time to Bigger Pockets, so you probably know her from there. And she is a proud mom, right, of two kids, correct?
Yeah.
Two. Okay. All right. So
Two now.
Two now. So Ms. Brie Schmit from Second City Realty, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. Last time I saw you, I was pregnant at the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit. I was 7 months pregnant, and now I've got two kids, and we're having this summit again in a few weeks.
Yeah. So we're super excited. We're going to talk about the summit, but I wanted to have Ms. Brie on because a lot of times, when you talk to investors, they're either investing or they're real estate agents or they're trying to sell a thing. Ms. Brie doesn't sell anything. She does a great summit that if you have not been to, definitely you got to go. We're going to talk about it. It's on May 6th and May 7th, 100%. Great quality information. So a big thumbs up. But having said that, Ms. Brie, I want to kind of jump right into it. So we kind of introduced you as you wear many, many hats. But when it comes to investing, I want you to kind of go back and just talk a little bit about that, because sometimes life-changing events change your life, right? What was that for you?
Yeah. So my story is, I'll try to go back and make it short. Otherwise, the whole podcast will just be about the story. I started investing in 2011. So I've been a landlord for 12 years. August will be my 12-year anniversary. I did a house hack in Chicago. So we bought a 3-unit property with really no intentions of buying anymore. The plan was always to have that be our forever home. And as we grew and as we needed more space, we would just connect the units, right? And eventually have a 3-story home. That was the plan. About 9 months after that happened, my father passed away. And he had a very aggressive form of cancer. It was, kind of out of nowhere. And I think I've talked about this on many, many of my podcasts, but the thing was, he died the day before he was supposed to retire. And he had always talked about, all the things he wanted to do with his life once he retired. And it was always, after you get married or after your brother finishes college, then I'm going to retire and do all these things. And his planned retirement party ended up being converted to his wake. And it really jarred me to the core, thinking about my life. I had been working in advertising sales for almost 10 years. I had, been working 60 hours a week, traveled all over the country for work. My goal in life was to be a female executive. And I had to really rethink things and be like, well, I'm not even 30 yet. And I'm already kind of burnt out, let's be honest. And could I really spend the next 30, 35 years of my life doing this? So that's kind of when our plans shifted. We bought another property in 2012. We bought another property in 2013. That was a live-in, a BRRRR, if you want to call it, a live-in renovation project. We then refinanced and took the money out of that property that we got from the equity and started investing in the Milwaukee market. 2014, I bought 10 properties in Milwaukee. 2015, I bought another 8 properties in Milwaukee, and then I started working with partners. So then between 2015 and 2016, I acquired another 10 properties with partners. I had 3 different partnerships. Everything was hunky-dory. Everything was going pretty smoothly. 2017, I got divorced, so I stopped buying properties. I couldn't add any assets. And then met my now husband, and that was another shift. I always tell the story. I think it was maybe our second or third date. He had taken the day off work and we were spending the day together. And at one point he's like, you need to get off your phone. I'm like, but I'm working, he's like, but you're always working. Like, if I'm taking time out of my life to get to know you and spend quality time with you, you need to take time out of your life to spend quality time with me. And he was very, I don't want to say strict is not the right word, but very adamant about if we're going to spend time together, phones down. To this day, our phones are off at 6 p.m. Our phones are off. We spend quality time together. So that also shifted my mindset and also with our future plans of, hey, are we going to get married? Are we going to start a family? I looked back and thought to myself, this is great. I own a brokerage firm. We've got 8 agents that work underneath me. We've got, I've got almost 100 units. I have a summit that I plan, but at the end of the day, I'm still working 60 hours a week. Right. And that wasn't the point of all this. Yes, I have freedom to travel and, take days off and do what I want. but I was still working a ton. So then 2017, 2018 was really a focus on efficiencies, streamlining things, right? How do I get my time back? How do I outsource things? What's important in my business? And then I had my daughter in 2019, and I started selling some of my properties. So I sold 10 properties, let's say, of the
So I want to
28.
kind of put a pause a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So you clearly, life change, your father passes away. It's like a big jolt, right? It's that moment when you're like, oh my God, am I really going to do this, right? Now you scale up to 2019, right? This is before
Yeah.
Corona, right? What was the impetus that kind of made you, it's like, okay, I'm going to start selling? Because I remember that you were talking about talking to economists. What was your mindset?
Yeah.
This is pre-Corona that caused you to start selling the properties. And
It
actually,
was.
before I go there, let's kind of explain your inventory, because this is important for people. In Chicago, what part of town, and A market, B market, C market, what would you call that market where you were investing in Chicago?
Yeah, my Chicago properties were in or are in North Center, Albany Park, and Portage Park.
Okay, got
So
it.
those are the first set of properties that I bought. They're, I would say, more B plus, A minus class tenants.
Got it.
Yeah, I've been landlording in Chicago for 12 years. Most of my tenants stay, on average about 3 years. Very, very, very rarely do they ever move out with any sort of damage. I think twice in 12 years of being a landlord have I ever had. I've only once had to ever file eviction, right? Most tenants don't even have problems with payments. Even when Corona hit, all my tenants paid rent. I didn't
Right.
have a single late payment.
We would call
That's
this a
more of an A,
good,
B market.
solid area, right?
Solid.
Solid,
Yeah.
great area of Chicago. On the northern side, people who are not familiar with Chicago, north part of the city, northwest. How about Milwaukee? Different market, different
Different
class of
market.
properties. So
Definitely more of a C class market.
C class. So why?
What does
Why
that
did you
mean?
go to C in Milwaukee versus being B plus A here in Chicago?
So the way I saw it, there was a lot of reasons. I didn't have the capital to scale up quickly with Chicago. Even now the Chicago market, you're talking between, let's say, $600,000 and $700,000 for a 3 flat, right? To get to the point of cash flow, right? My goal was $35,000 a month of gross rent, right? That was my goal, was to hit. To get that volume of income, right? I would need so much capital and like a capital infusion to be able to afford properties in Chicago, right? Because again, when you're looking at it at the end of the day, it's like, let's just say, for example, when you're buying a property in the north side of Chicago, the way I run my numbers, you're looking at a solid 6.5% cap rate, right?
Yeah.
Not a home run, not terrible, but nothing that you're going to, like, whenever we have California investors that call me that want to invest, I would tell, like, Chicago's probably not the right market for you.
Right.
It's not what you're seeking out. Now, Milwaukee, on the other hand, was it's a C-class market. So I always describe it as, if a tenant's car breaks down and it costs $500 to fix, they don't have that $500 to fix their car. And pay rent. So if
they're going to fix their car first.
They're going to fix their car first, because then they can't go to work.
Yeah.
Right. So then they're going to fall behind. Right.
Okay.
So it's more of a paycheck to paycheck type tenant base. More common, if they can't pay their rent, they just move out in the middle of the night and don't tell you, like things that you would never ever see in Chicago, at least in the areas I invest. But it's a higher cash flow market. So even at the end of the day, when I actually just ran these numbers, and I'll get into when I sold the properties, the properties performed at 10% cap rate, after all expenses. You're not going to see those numbers in Chicago. Now, I always go back to that 80s rap song, like more money, more problems, right? The time, even though I self-manage my Chicago stuff and I have professional management in Chicago or in Milwaukee, the time spent managing the managers and just dealing with the stuff that comes up with C-class assets was tenfold in the Milwaukee market.
So you needed a babysitter for the babysitter, basically.
I mean, even in the greatest manager in the world, we had tenants that blew up our garage. We had a house, like we had a tenant that burned down our 4 unit. There's so many other things that you have to be involved in, regardless of how great your manager is, that you just don't see in Chicago.
And, Ms. Brie, can you comment on that? Because sometimes what people don't understand is an A-class tenant or in the locations that you had it, right? It's not like, oh, well, do you get double the amount of calls? No, the headaches are 4 to 5 times when you change the class of the tenant. Can you explain that a little bit?
Huge difference. Oh my God. So I always tell you, like, my Chicago tenants, like maybe on a bad year, I might get 2 calls per tenant. Right. Bad year. I've had one tenant for 7 years who I've probably been in his place to repair something maybe 5 times in 7 years. C-class assets, it's a constant thing. For some reason, like turning off bathtubs, right, is a problem, and it leaks into the unit below. Happens all the time. Or the toilet's running, they don't say anything. Again, like you've got all of a sudden plumbing leaks. It's a constant thing. And what people don't understand, and one of the things that I know I did not understand, is roofs, furnaces, hot water heaters, right? All those things cost the same. If you buy a $700,000 house or $100,000 like 3 flat, right? Those things cost the same. But when you're looking at it as percentage of rent, right? If my $700,000 property brings in $6,000 a month rent, and my $100,000 property brings in $1,200 a month rent, right? And a roof, I need to replace a roof, right? That is so much of my cash flow. I just had a turnover. My tenant was there. We bought the building in 2015. Then it was an inherited tenant. So she was there before I even bought the building. She just left. So she's been there for 9 years of my ownership, and it cost $8,000 to renovate her unit. Well, when the rent is $850, I'm looking at, okay, so now that's, 10 months of cash flow, but that doesn't include my mortgage, my taxes, my insurance, right? It's like that just wiped out probably a year and a half of cash flow. But $8,000 on a rental on my units in Chicago would be, 3-4 months of cash flow. So that's one of the things that I did not, even though I ran my numbers, which much more higher percentages for CapEx and repair, I didn't grasp that concept very well in the beginning.
A lot of times it's a very hard concept to grasp, that cheaper is not always better. Right. No. I genuinely started with this, and I was very fortunate that way, that I never bought cheap properties. I never bought expensive properties. The mid B plus A markets is what was kind of in the Chicago suburbs. And that's what I stuck to. And literally on 250 plus properties owned, if we get 4 calls, 5 calls a week, that's a big deal. Right? We don't generally, the type of calls we'll get generally are, hey, it's really hot day. Today, the air conditioning didn't come on, right? It's really cold day. Those type of calls most of the times in B plus A places. And most tenants, the mentality is very different. They're like me and you. Husband, wife get into an argument. People in that class of property, they don't start punching walls, right? We've all had, with your girlfriend, with your spouse, you have, the normal human being, but we don't start throwing plates. We don't start punching. I mean, that's not what we all do. We all feel mad at times, right? But yet in a certain class, that's what the reaction is. Well, I was mad, man. I just punched a hole through the door. I'm like, it doesn't happen in my house or your house, probably. Right? But it's just
someone blew up our garage.
Right.
The boyfriend cheated on the girlfriend. She took a baseball bat to all of our windows, and then went to the gas station, got one of those red containers, dumped it over his car, and blew up our garage. That stuff doesn't happen. You're right, in certain classes.
I want to kind of go back to that thought, right? In 2019, you did something very drastic. When I first heard you say that, you're like, Andrew, I sold my properties, right? I still remember that conversation. Yeah. So what was the impetus for that? What was the thinking at that time?
So I was actually at a conference in Philadelphia, said very similar to like the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit. And there was an economist. He was the first speaker of the conference. And I remember sitting there, like writing down all these big words I didn't understand, like yield curve and, inversions. And I'm like, I should Google this stuff. Like, I know the real estate world, right? But I don't know outside of my little bubble, right? Economic things that are going to impact my little bubble world. So I planned, I'm like, should be a goal of mine. I want to learn more about economic stuff. And at the end of the conference, they did a charity auction. And the economist was auctioning off his time. So I bid on him and won because I wanted to sit down and talk with him more. And so part of that was, he was teaching me about things I should be looking at, how to understand things, right? How the banks in Europe affect the US market, which then affects real estate, right? That's what I wanted to learn about.
So not a micro level, on a macro level.
Both, like he was there like to essentially like answer my questions and tell me like that's what I wanted to learn was how other things are affecting my real estate world, my little bubble here. But part of that was he was doing a deep dive into my portfolio. So he had asked me to, he gave me a bunch of an Excel sheet. What did you buy it for? What do you think it's worth today? Right? What was last year's cash flow? What was, he had me break down every single year's cash flow. And I gave him this Excel and he came back to me like a couple of weeks later. He's like, okay, let's go through this. Like, again, he used all these different calculations. Half of them I still don't completely understand, but sure. I had never really looked back at the performance of the properties, right? It was always very short-sighted. Like looking at my numbers was always like, hey, we had a really good quarter, or this was, we did a little bit better this year than we did last year. But I never went back and looked at 7 whole years the same time and was like, hey, how are these properties performing, especially based on what my original projections were? And so it was a really interesting exercise for me because it opened my eyes. I'm like, hey, some of these properties aren't doing very well. And it's one of the reasons why when everyone asks me, like, why would you go buy, right? I bought $1 million of property in 9 months. Why wouldn't you just buy one big 50 unit, 100 unit, whatever? Like, everyone wants to go big into commercial, and this was one of the reasons, because if I had properties that were not performing, I could just sell off those properties and keep the ones that were performing, right? It gives you that flexibility. So at the end of the day, I looked at the spreadsheet and said, okay, I'm looking at the number that really resonated with me is if I sold it today, how many years cash flow would I get? So let's just say I'm going to throw out numbers here. I bought it for 80, right? I could sell it for 120. Okay. After, fees and all that stuff, let's say I'll profit $20,000. If I'm only making $1,000 a year in this property, that's 20 years cash flow up front. So I looked at my list and I said, okay, anything that I can get 10 years of cash flow now or plus 10 plus years by selling, I'm going to do that. So I sold a couple in 2018. I then expanded that list and brought it to my partners and said, do you want to keep or sell? It's like one of my partners sold one of my properties sold another one. I sold, I think, 2 more properties. And then COVID hit. So the last of our properties were under contract when COVID hit and those closed. And then I took off and didn't sell anything until this most recent year.
Okay. So you sold, so what part of your portfolio have you kept, or any?
Yeah, it's a good question. I kept my Chicago properties.
Okay.
I completely cashed out all my Milwaukee properties. There was 18 properties that I sold. My one partner.
Did you distribute anything or did you do a 1031 out of it?
No, I took a tax hit.
Okay, you took a tax hit. Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I can talk about that too. That was I hate paying taxes. I just sent the IRS, like I said, I just sold the properties March 15th. And Q1 payments are due Monday. I just sent the IRS over 6 figures. Yeah. And estimated tax payments. It sucks. But at the same time, I didn't know what I wanted to do with the capital. I didn't want to feel rushed or like forced into something by 1031ing it. Yeah.
Got it.
So I decided to take the tax hit.
So I want to ask you, and this is, I know we have discussed this in the past, right? Because you built up your portfolio initially with house hacking, with residential mortgages.
Yeah.
Then you went into buying properties with commercial, with small banks, credit union, that kind of stuff, with doing basically a buy, rehab, value add, and refi out with equity, the whole 9 yards, right? Now, you've been around, right? You're not like a newbie to the game. You've been a speaker at a lot of big panels, a lot of big things. You have friends that are in the multi-unit game, right?
Yeah.
Why have you never really gone, oh my God, go big or go home? You don't seem to be of that ilk, but
No.
explain the reason behind that.
So actually, I did do my first syndication deal though.
Okay.
I invested in my first syndication deal last year.
As a LP?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
There's a lot of reasons, I felt the market is pretty oversaturated. It's something that I've always been open to. It's just nothing has ever made me feel 100% comfortable, right? And that's how I invest. I invest when it feels right to me, and because we've talked before about it being about capital preservation as well.
Sure, 100%.
But the big multifamily world, right? I think a lot of people think that you have to go big to be successful. You have to have an office building with 100 employees, right? And you wear a suit and tie every day. Like, that is not my world. I don't even have pants on. I'm a pajama all day person, 100%. I don't want to go to an office. I don't want employees. I don't want to be responsible for other people's money. Like, I'm a freedom investor. I invest for the lifestyle. 100%.
So I want to talk about this, right? Because I know you're big on vacations, right?
Yeah.
Are you still taking, I know you take a pretty elaborate vacation where you just kind of cut off from the world, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We just got back on Tuesday.
Oh, okay, great. So that's something now with your babies, right? That's something as a family, you guys have decided that that's what we're going to do. And that's where we're going to put our resources, time, and have to be able to have the money and the time to be able to do something like that.
Absolutely. So we just got back on Tuesday. It was my 40th birthday.
Oh, congratulations.
Yes. So I took the little kids. We went to Orlando. That was just a quick trip. We're going to Europe for a month in September. Okay. And then we're coming back, hopefully, and we're going to leave from October until March and go RV.
Okay. Got it.
So that's my husband's dream, is to go RV.
Got it. So
not mine.
Is your husband full-time in real estate also, or he does something else?
No, he stays with the kid.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay, perfect. Great.
So we're together like 24/7 with our kids.
Got it. Okay, good. And real estate, it's a beautiful thing about real estate is that it allows you to kind of mold your lifestyle, right? And vice versa. You can mold your real estate to lifestyle or lifestyle to real estate, as long as you know what you're doing.
Absolutely. I talked about it before. I'm so glad that I had the energy and the capacity to build the business up before I had kids, because once I had kids, it changed dramatically.
Correct.
Said my son's 15 months. I've never been away from my son for more than 2 hours. I've never been away from my daughter for more than 4 hours. Oh, I did the Bigger Pockets conference, so I did leave for 2 days. Afternoons are family time. Like, I work in the mornings typically. After 12 o'clock noon, my day is done. That's time. It's my family time. So I condense my day. I get up at 5 and I start working, and I'm trying to be done by noon so that we have time to spend quality time as a family. Like, that's my priority now. And that's the freedom that real estate does give you. Like I said, I don't want to be the boss with the office and the employees and,
Sure.
working all day. That was never my intention from the very beginning of this. It was always to have that freedom to spend quality time. Because that's that when my dad died, that was the thing, that the catalyst for all this.
Right.
That
makes perfect sense. So now looking into the future, right? As we kind of talk about it right now, looking into the future, besides vacations, right?
Yeah.
What are on a business level, what are the goals for you guys as a family?
Yeah. So there's a couple of goals, right? Said we just sold these properties. It's been a month, not even. Um, and I do not know what we're going to do with the money. We've got the money set aside, ready to invest, just like we did for the properties I sold in 2018 and 2019. We took that money, I sat on it for a while, I invested some in the stock market, but then I invested a bunch of it into a syndication deal. And it was the first deal that made sense to me. I knew the area very well, I understood the strategy very well. It made a lot of sense. So moving forward, there really isn't a goal set. It's just when something seems right. When something feels right. I actually looked at doing a mixed use building in Chicago. It had a restaurant on the first floor, and then apartments up top. So that was interesting to me. I ended up not moving forward with that one for a couple of reasons, but I'm definitely not investing in C-class assets. I'll definitely be looking in the Chicago market, or I'll also be considering syndications, but it's not pretty heavy on my list. But that's why I like going to these kind of events like the summit. Is it re-energizes me, right? I get so many different ideas. I like hearing from other speakers about what they're doing, what's been successful. And the big thing right now to me is, what's the future of the real estate market? I don't think, obviously no one has a crystal ball to know, but there's people that are way, way smarter than me going to be talking about how they're adjusting their business now to prepare for those things. And I want to hear what they have to say before deciding anything.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about the summit. You and John do the summit. Actually, we're doing a recording with John Casman here in a couple of days. The date we said is May 6th and 7th. So when we get this out to everybody, how do people sign up for the summit?
The website is midwestresummit.com.
midwestresummit.com. Okay, great.
You can use promo code Andrew for $50 off tickets.
Sure. Okay, great. Use promo code
Andrew. It's a 2-day event. Perfect. We've got you'll be a speaker there. We just added Joe Fairless as a speaker. Ashley Wilson, she's also going to be a speaker. Jay Papazan is our headline speaker. He wrote The One Thing, The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. He wrote the book Hold. He wrote the book Flip. He's written more books about real estate investing than anyone else I know. So he will be doing our Saturday morning session on his book, The One Thing, and then he'll also be doing a breakout session on goal setting. We've got everything from syndication, raising capital. We have a panel on the economy. We have a speaker talking about the local Airbnb policies. So anything with short-term rentals, how that's being reshaped, at least in Chicago, especially. Everything from, how to flip successfully in this market, all those things are being discussed. So we like to cultivate a variety of speakers in a non-pitch environment, right? To help educate you on and reinvigorate ideas. That's what I look at it as well as, we've got built-in networking and breakout sessions and all those fun things. So I come away, I always lose my voice every single conference. By the end of it, I can't talk anymore because I've been talking for 2 days straight. But that's what the event is all about.
Got it. So Midwest RE Summit, use the code Andrew and you get a $50 discount. I'd highly, highly encourage everybody from Mastery that's listening, if you can attend 100%. It's a great, great event. And what I love about what they do is that there's not a bunch of people that are coming and pitching you a bunch of different products to buy. It's purely informational. You can gather a lot of thoughts, a lot of ideas, and then come back and use it in the local market. I think that's the wonderful part about it. Ms. Brie, did I forget anything else that we were supposed to cover that I did not touch upon? You want to touch upon? No? Okay, great. It's always a pleasure having you. It'd be great to see you after a couple of years, right? After the break we've had.
So great to see everyone.
Yeah, so super thrilled. We'll meet everybody at the Midwest RE Summit. Go there, register, sign up, and great having everybody again. For everybody from the Cash Flow Squad, share the podcast, guys. Like it; it goes a long, long, long way, right? And Brie is a wonderful resource to reach out to in the local area to connect with. Ms. Brie, having said that, thanks a bunch, and guys, have a great day.